shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is Brad Kearns. Brad, this is your second time on. First time we discussed your book, The Primal Endurance. And if you're interested in that podcast, check it out on iTunes. It was done March 24th, 2016, episode number 37. But for today, we're here to talk about their new book, The Keto Reset Diet. So how are you today, Brad?
Noah, thanks for having me back. I'm so happy to be back. I can't believe it was that long ago. I'm amazed, but time flies, and now here we are, fully immersed into the keto scene. And Mark Sisson and I are very excited that it's become so popular and people are really paying attention to this, which we feel is kind of the highest expression of the benefits of the low-carb primal paleo movement, this ketogenic eating style where you access a different energy source by, greatly restricting your dietary carbohydrate intake, and you enjoy a smattering of benefits which are of great interest to everyone, not just someone who's looking to lose weight or someone who's looking to do crazy endurance feats, but for all of us that want to minimize our risk of cancer and cognitive decline and the things that are happening at such an epidemic and alarming rate these days, and also just clean out our system. That's why the book is called The Keto Reset, is you just get into this reset mode where you allow the benefits of ketone burning to kick in and have these improved cellular functions, improved immune function, and of course the big goal for many people is to finally get rid of that excess body fat, which is such a frustrating challenge for many people. Even the most health conscious people who are watching their calories, they're diligently exercising, and things just aren't happening in the way that they dream.
Well, thanks for that intro, Brad. And you know what I want to do is I took your bio and made it really short, but I want people to hear the few things that I picked out so they get a feel for you, who you are too. So Brad Kearns is the president of Primal Blueprint Publishing, co-author of Primal Endurance, and a former national champion and number 3 world-ranked professional triathlete. So hopefully that puts you in perspective for our audience, because you're a rock star and you know it, and your bio proves it.
Oh, anyone who remembers me, I get a kick out of, because I stopped racing triathlons over 20 years ago, but there's so many hardcore people that have been doing it for decades, and they'll mention a race from way back when, and it's like, well, that's you and my brother and myself that I'm sure remember that. So there's a third person. That's great,
So you mentioned how hot this keto topic is, and for you and Mark, I mean, how did this book come about? Like, what was the process for this being written and having the opportunity to write this book?
Well, there's 2 ladies nearby to you. You could probably see their building from your house. Celeste Fine of Sterling Lord Literary Agency and Diana Baroni from Penguin Random House. And their job is to, look at the direction of culture and the trends and the areas of interest and the breaking science. And so they were instrumental in saying, they think this would be a good fit for, what we've been doing for a decade now is banging this drum about the primal and the paleo diet and the primal living principles. And when Mark and I first started back in, get going on this Primal Blueprint book and movement, this was 2008, we started working on that project, and no one would have us. We pitched the publishers and the agents, and everyone thought it was crazy to recommend eating a low carbohydrate diet and that fat was so bad for you and cholesterol, and all the messages that we were conveying that were based on evolutionary science and, highly respected science now, a decade later, but then it was sort of on the fringe. So we kind of had to walk our own path, and along with the other early pioneers in the movement, people like Dr. Art Devaney, Dr. Lauren Cordain, Rob Wolf, the early authors and people that were really getting out there and challenging conventional wisdom. It's been a really great journey to see a lot of validation, and of course the success story is more important than anything. And if you look on marksdailyapple.com, there's literally thousands of published success stories now of people showing before and after pictures. And so regardless of where you intellectually stand on this continued debate about whether fat is okay to eat and whether it's advisable to cut carbs out of your diet and not have a grain-based diet anymore. You're going to look at these success stories and also the science too, and say, wow, the evolutionary model makes great sense because humans have been evolving for 2.5 million years in hunter-gatherer style eating patterns. So we've been eating throughout our evolutionary history. Um, we've been eating off the menu of meat, fish, fowl, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and not much else until the advent of civilization and agriculture and cultivated grains. And so now our diets, only in recent history on the evolutionary timeline, but now we're having these diets that are based on massive amounts of refined carbohydrates that entails an excessive amount of insulin production, which can be extremely unhealthy and leads to what's widely regarded as the number one public health problem of modern times, which is metabolic syndrome. That's not disputed by physicians or scientists. Everyone knows that this metabolic syndrome, this trend toward obesity, high blood pressure, high blood triglycerides, other disease risk factors in the blood, we know this is the thing that we got to tackle or we're going to go broke as a country. I mean, Dr. Doug McGuff, one of our authors who wrote the Primal Prescription, co-wrote, he cited a statistic that if the type 2 diabetes rates continue at the current rate, the U.S. Treasury will be bankrupt by 2060 just from caring for type 2 diabetics and the very high cost of keeping these people alive for a long time, which we're able to do now, but the high cost of doing so. And it's completely and entirely preventable by dietary modification. You can reverse your blood values that qualify you as a type 2 diabetic in as little as a month, but we're still battling this conventional wisdom, the mighty forces of consumerism and advertising, and the people that are making billions of dollars off peddling grains and sugars. And so it's an uphill battle. But back to the start of your question, the keto reset and the ketogenic eating style is really taking it all the way to the highest level of benefits that you can enjoy from escaping from dependency on dietary carbohydrates, which is what the standard American diet is doing. You're dependent on your next meal for energy and going all the way to being fully what we call fat and keto adapted, meaning you have the ability to burn a variety of energy sources, particularly your stored body fat, and hand in hand with that, if you need them, these things called ketone bodies that are byproducts of fat metabolism in the liver when your dietary carbohydrate intake is restricted. And the ketones burn in the body just like glucose, so the brain can use them, the heart, the skeletal muscle can all burn these wonderful internally manufactured energy sources in the absence of dietary carbohydrate. So today, since we have food at our disposal anytime, we can drive down to Starbucks, we can order in advance on our app and go pick up some sugar anytime we want. The idea is that you have to be pretty diligent and pretty well prepared to try this keto thing. So I want to emphasize that because it's becoming a buzzword. It's the number one diet search term. It just passed paleo a year and a half ago or something on Google. So people are interested in this. They're realizing it. But if you're not well prepared and you don't proceed in a methodical manner and a reasonable manner toward this ketogenic eating style, what you're going to have is yet another extreme diet that's going to cause you to pump out stress hormones, make sugar from breaking down your own muscle tissue, and eventually burning out because of the difficulty and the strain and the struggle. So we have an entirely different message in the book, which we can detail a little bit further if you want. But that's the main issue here, is that you got to do this stuff right because it is an extreme departure from your dietary patterns that you've been following for your whole life, likely. As soon as you woke up and got stuffed a cereal bowl in your face, you've been a sugar burner and dependent on dietary carbohydrates as your primary energy source. And to determine if this is you, if this rings a bell, if you skip a meal, do you feel cranky, hungry, poor cognitive function until you find your next meal? And that's the sign. If you're not able to skip a meal, or your energy level, your mood, and your cognitive function is dependent upon your caloric intake, that's when you know you're carbohydrate dependent.
That was me for a very long time. Now, Brad, you mentioned, I like to think of this as almost ketogenic 101. So you mentioned 4 terms in your beautiful 5 minutes that I'd like you to kind of break down, just defined for the audience, so they get a real feel for where we're heading. So, in those four terms are ketones, ketosis, ketogenic diet, and fat adapted.
Whew, what a quiz.
I know, right? Go.
And okay, here we go. Another monologue. Oh my gosh. No, thanks for backing it up a little bit because those in particular, even if you're well informed and you're not a 101 person, there's some nuances that are really important to understand. So we'll try to get into that. What was the order again? Say it one at a time.
Ketones themselves.
Yeah, so ketones are these energy-rich byproducts of fat metabolism in the liver. They're an actual energy source. We sometimes call them the fourth macronutrient. So everyone's familiar with carbohydrates, protein, and fat, which you can get from ingested sources. And ketones are manufactured internally in your liver, a little bit elsewhere too, the colon, the muscle tissue themselves, but mainly they're made in the liver. When you're burning a lot of fat and you have low levels of liver glycogen, that's the storage form of glucose, low levels of dietary carbohydrate intake, and low levels of insulin, which is uncommon if you're in a high carbohydrate eating pattern. You have very high levels of insulin, excessive levels of insulin, and so it's a very fragile and delicate state of metabolic function that entails that carb restriction. So as soon as you wake up and slam an orange juice, you will stop producing ketones that you might have been starting to from an overnight fast. So we're all good at making ketones. We just override it or interfere with it when we consume carbohydrates in the diet. So they're you call it an emergency energy source that's part of our genetics from evolution to keep the brain functioning, especially because the brain, again, can only burn glucose. It doesn't burn fat or protein. So the brain is the number one energy demand organ in the body. Takes like 20 to 25% of our total energy expenditures in the brain, and it burns only glucose, or the alternative, the glucose-like alternative of ketones, or sometimes called ketone bodies. So that's definition number one.
Ketosis.
So ketosis is literally the accumulation of ketones in the bloodstream faster than they are being burned. And it's important to understand that because the term is bantered around like crazy to represent everything having to do with a low carbohydrate eating pattern and the goal of this wonderful goal of getting into ketosis. But if you understand that definition, it's sort of like if you're an athlete, you know the definition of anaerobic threshold, and the definition is that lactate is accumulating in the bloodstream faster than you can remove it, and so that's the burn when you're feeling that burn when you're doing an exercise class. So back to ketosis, that means you're making ketones in the liver, but it's not necessarily a health or dietary attribute. So as Dr. Kate Shanahan says, she's had some good shows on my channel, the Primal Endurance podcast, and we are just launching here in the fall of 2017 the Keto Reset podcast to get deep into this keto stuff. So I'm all over there on the specific topics on the podcast scene. Love it. You know, to go in niche, look at the show, see the description, see if you want to listen to it, move on to the next one. Just like your stuff is great, man. You can pick and choose. But anyway, the misunderstanding that people have is that simply getting into ketosis is a success story. And the distinction is that if you greatly restrict dietary carbohydrate, but you're not prepared, you're not good at burning stored body fat or making ketones because you're doing it too quickly and extremely, you hang up from the podcast and you say, I'm going to try it. I'm going to stop eating carbs. What's going to happen is you will definitely make ketones pretty quickly, but you won't be able to burn them because you're not fat and keto adapted yet. And it takes a transition period. A lot of the scientists like Finney and Volek, two of the pioneers in the keto scene, the low carbohydrate scene, especially for athletes, they've written two good books, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance and The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. Their research shows that it takes a few weeks of diligent carbohydrate restriction to show a good success in being having stored body fat being your preferred fuel choice and being able to make and burn ketones in the brain. So if you're in ketosis but you're not well adapted, you'll just excrete them through the breath and the urine. And so we go back all the way to the days of Atkins, which has been around since the 70s, and the known side effect of doing the Atkins thing was bad breath. It was an acetone smelling breath, and that's because acetone is the byproduct of ketone excretion. So the ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate, are broken down into acetone, and you breathe them, and so everyone knows that you're in ketosis. But the sign that they're being excreted is not what you want. You want to be burning these things as a fat and keto-adapted individual. So that's the second definition, huh?
Ketogenic diet.
So ketogenic diet is a macronutrient pattern that promotes the manufacturing of ketones in the liver. And the experts, again, are citing these numbers, which have been pretty well validated. There's not a lot of dispute, so we can put them out there now, is that your total dietary carbohydrate intake per day has to be 50 grams or below. And even for people familiar with the primal and paleo scene, and we know we're not eating sugars and grains, but we're going into a much lower carbohydrate intake than the average standard American diet person, who might eat 250, 300, 400, 500 grams of carbohydrate per day. So for primal paleo, we talk about eating 150 grams per day or less. And then for keto, we're talking about going down to 50 grams per day or less. So in practical terms, what that means is that you're still eating a ton of high fiber, nutrient dense vegetables. So we want to make that important point that this is not restricting some of the most nutritious foods known to mankind, right? So you're going to have a high vegetable intake diet because those deliver very few total carbohydrates when you add it all up. But you're going to be restricting temporarily, as you strive for this ketone burning state, you're going to be restricting some of the more high glycemic carbohydrates, such as most fruits, all grains and sugars, of course, and even things like sweet potatoes, wild rice, and things that we otherwise approve as nutrient-dense, high-carbohydrate foods, all the legumes, things like that, in the effort of meeting that 50 gram per day. That's a hard number, that 50 grams. If you're inactive, it goes all the way down to 20 grams. So basically, you want to stay active, do moderate exercise, and focus on the vegetables and minimize the other sources of carbohydrates. And in their place, you emphasize the nutritious, healthy, natural fats. So things like high quality, naturally sourced meat and animal products, eggs, the high fat plant products such as avocados, coconuts, olives, and their oils. And you have a pretty simple and very nutrient dense diet when you're going for this keto. So there's no objections on that level, but you do have to make an effort to continue that intake of the above ground, leafy green, high fiber, cruciferous vegetables, things like that, and then minimizing some of the vegetables that are the more glycemic vegetables, the stuff that's grown in the ground, like carrots and rutabaga and squash and things like that. And this is, again, just a temporary measure to enter into this state of nutritional ketosis where you're making and burning ketones in place of glucose and affording all kinds of benefits for brain function, anti-inflammatory, more oxygen delivery to the brain. That's why your brain works better. Of course, the accelerated reduction of any excess body fat and any goals you have along those lines will be hit once and for all with this type of dietary strategy. Easier and more clearly and more securely than any other thing you try with your diet.
Final term, and then I have one more few questions just regarding the ketogenic diet itself. Being fat adapted.
So fat adapted is the ability to access and burn internal storage of body fat expertly anytime you need it. And you could put an analogy definition is that you can skip a meal and you feel fine. You feel like nothing's changed in your metabolic function. So what's really happening And Mark Sisson loves to use this line when he's giving a lecture. When you're fat adapted, you can eat your next meal off your plate or off your butt and your thighs. It's your choice if you're trying to lose excess body fat. So when we talk about starting into the primal or paleo eating style and transitioning over from the standard American high carbohydrate eating pattern, most people are used to waking up and having that good all-American breakfast to start their day with cereal, orange juice, toast with jam, a massive dose of carbohydrates. And we've been doing that every day for decades and decades. So we're used to it. And we want to make a transition. So, our strong recommendation is to trade in that bowl of cereal, oatmeal, toast, juice, whatever, for a big, delicious omelet that's very filling. It's very nutritious. There's almost no carbohydrate load, but you're getting a lot of healthy, nutritious fats and protein, and you can burn through that omelet over the next few hours in a nice, stable blood sugar manner because you didn't spike it with the meal. It's a very easy transition to trade in your all-American high-carb breakfast for something that's a high-fat breakfast. Now, over time, as you get better and better at burning body fat, at burning fat from the diet or from your body, then you will be in this state where you really don't need to eat a steady 3 meals a day. And meals can be, they're really give or take because you're fat adapted and you can elegantly burn. Of course, you have plenty of fat on your body. Anyone, even the most slender elite Olympic marathoner, has tens of thousands of calories of stored body fat able to access at any time and burn for a long time without needing food. And so the thing that you're doing with keto is you're sort of getting these long known and long scientifically validated benefits of fasting, of being in that fasted state where your cellular function is improved, your immune function is improved, your cognitive function is improved. You're getting those fasting-like benefits without having to starve yourself for the next 3 days. And that's something that maybe people aren't even aware that your body works better when it's fasting and when it's starving. But this is the ultimate starvation mechanism that has allowed us to survive for 2.5 million years. Is when we are starving, when we're not eating, we make maximum efficiency with our cellular repair. We recycle damaged cellular material and we consume it. And on the opposite end, when we're overfed, which is the characterization of the standard American diet, these 3 meals a day, we're constantly consuming calories rather than requiring our bodies to be efficient with the energy sources that we have in storage and the cellular material that's floating around in our bloodstream. So when we're overfed, we accelerate cell division and we accelerate the aging process. So this is only desirable when you're a baby trying to double your birth weight in the first year of your life, or when you're a teenager trying to put on 25 pounds of muscle to make the football team, which is a really bad idea because you're going to get your head knocked around. So let's say putting on 25 pounds of muscle to pursue other goals like CrossFit or something like that. But when you want to have cell division, pregnant mother is the final example. There's times in our life when we want accelerated cell division, but for the rest of us, we want longevity, and accelerated cell division is in counter to longevity. So fasting, eating ketogenic style, becoming calorically efficient. That's another buzzword that I'd love you to take away and understand and know. Becoming calorically efficient means that you can get by and feel great and feel total dietary satisfaction at each meal on fewer total calories because you're not spiking your blood sugar, getting the insulin rush, and getting hungry for more food because your insulin has blocked your fat burning. And that's what happens when you eat a high-carb diet. You produce a lot of insulin. When insulin's in the bloodstream, you cannot access and burn stored body fat. So you're, again, dependent on your next meal for energy, even though you have tens of thousands of calories of stored body fat that would be accessible if you weren't on this carbohydrate dependency train.
Beautifully said. Now, we hit the kind of the diet component pretty hard, but what else in the Keto Reset book do you talk about? Like, what lifestyle measures do you take that help support this lifestyle, or do you discuss in the book?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for setting that up because like I said at the outset of the show, Noah, There's ways to do this wrong and really screw it up and just have it be in the trash heap as another failed diet. So if you just view this as a diet and an eating strategy, you're only getting a partial picture. Yes, the dietary guidelines are quite distinct and quite strict, you might call them, because you can have this many carbohydrates per day. And I forgot to mention the protein guideline too, where we don't want to overconsume protein, because a lot of people that go on a low carbohydrate diet, they're also afraid of emphasizing fat, and so they go on what amounts to a high protein diet. And when you overconsume protein, you overstimulate these growth factors for accelerated cell division and increased cancer risk, and you also have a tendency to convert excess protein into glucose to fuel your sugar needs that you're not getting from your diet if you're not fat adapted yet. So protein also has to be targeted at the expert generally agreeing upon somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.7 grams per pound of lean body mass per day. If you're not into the science, you're not using your macronutrient calculators, that amounts to likely less protein than you've been consuming in a routine manner following the standard American diet. So there's no extra effort to go find concentrated sources of protein or bang these powders 3 times a day with your protein shake. You're going to get plenty of protein from the plants and the high-fat animal products and whatever else you're consuming with the high nutritional value whole foods diet. So it's really not a big thing to worry about, but you're making sure that you're not over consuming protein. So you got the carbs and protein, and then you consume as much fat as you require to maintain total dietary satisfaction at each meal and never struggle or suffer. So in my own story, I used to tell people, I told people about what I used to consume every morning was this giant bowl of cereal with sometimes hot cereal mixed with cold cereal and scoops of yogurt and fresh berries and banana and coconut milk on top. And it was a huge carbohydrate bomb. And I traded that in for a huge omelet every day. So that was, keeping me going for many, many hours. But then as the years went by, I started to realize that I could just as well fast as consume the omelet. And I didn't feel any different. I didn't feel any better or worse. It was just me showing that I had progressed toward a high level of fat adaptation. So that's the ultimate goal that we want for people, is to have a smooth transition where they're not starving, they're not struggling, they're not obsessing about calories or things that they're missing in their diet, but they're enjoying things like the omelet, and they're snacking on macadamia nuts if necessary, and other nutrient-dense, delicious snacks, 85 or 90% dark chocolate smothered in some almond butter. These are things that are really nutritious, really filling, but again, they're low in carbohydrates, so they're falling in that category of ketogenic eating.
I got to tell you, 90% Lindt dark chocolate with some almond butter or some ghee on it is one of my favorite snacks.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you put a plug in there for this show, sponsored by Lindt dark chocolate.
I know.
Yeah, those guys make a really nice they make a nice clean product, and you can order it. They have a website and they give you like discounts and stuff. So I just ordered like a couple dozen of those 90% bars because they're kind of hard to find. But it takes a while to become habituated to that high percentage of cacao because we're used to milk chocolate or mild dark chocolate that's down in the 50 and 60% range. But when you get up over 90, you're looking at a good source of nutritious fats, a lot of antioxidant value, a lot of other polyphenols and things that are known to deliver excellent health benefits and minimal objections because the carbohydrate content is so low. So you can make this thing work even if you're a foodie, and people come to me all the time and say, well, I can't live without my bread or my Starbucks drinks. And really what's going on is we've developed an addiction. That's not as nice a word as dependency, but we do have a dependency/addiction on carbohydrates, and there's actual chemical reasons for this. I mean, sugar has addictive properties. Dr. Lustig's work and his books detail this. Dr. Davis's book, Wheat Belly, talks about the addictive properties in the brain, the opioid stimulating effects of things like wheat in the diet. And so we have to accept and acknowledge that we're down a bad path here where we're addicted to our bread, we're addicted to regular meals, which should not be that way. And if you have even a basic comparison to the evolutionary model, you can realize that humans were not eating 3 meals a day throughout history. This is a new construct of society, and it's doing us a lot of harm in our overall health. So the goal, like I said earlier in the show, this keto deal is for everyone. It's not just for strict, freaky fitness health people that are plunging into the next crazy diet every week, but it's for everyone to sit back and consider, I would love to become fat adapted because it's the healthiest way to live. And by the way, I'm going to get a lot of byproduct benefits, including the reduction of excess body fat, because now fat is your primary fuel source rather than ingested carbohydrates.
How about sleep and exercise?
Oh yeah, so I didn't really answer your question. I just got pumped up again. But if you have this narrow view that is just a diet, you're going to really struggle because we're also immersed in what we might call a sugar-burning, high-stress lifestyle. So when you're in that hectic mode, when you're running around with too many things on your to-do list, you're constantly hyper-connected with digital technology, your brain is working in overdrive, and you're rushing through your day, and you're breathing in a shallow, panting manner, these are all things that promote sugar burning and promote carbohydrate dependency. And everyone can relate to this when you have that feeling of burnout when you come in the door after a long day at work or whatever you've been doing out and about, and you kind of crash and burn on the couch, and you have that low blood sugar sensation, and you want to start munching on miniature chocolates left over from Halloween before you have another high carbohydrate dinner, and then another hour or two of energy, and then you're crashed out on the couch again trying to stay awake through your Netflix queue. So when we're in these sugar-burning, high-stress, sympathetic nervous system dominant lifestyle patterns, it's going to be very, very difficult to ditch those refined carbohydrates out of your diet because they go hand in hand with high-stress living. So in the book, we have a whole section about getting these other complementary lifestyle practices dialed in and promoting your progression over to being fat and keto adapted. So with the exercise, the number one most important thing is to avoid anything that has any whiff of being chronic in nature. And we talk about chronic cardio on the last show when we were discussing Primal Endurance and how many serious athletes, devoted fitness enthusiasts, are chronically overstimulating their stress hormones because their workouts are slightly too difficult and they do them too frequently. And so they're plunged into this pattern that we call chronic cardio or chronic exercise. And what happens is when you do these depleting workouts, you finish the workout and you find yourself craving sugar. And no matter what some clown says on a podcast, there's no way you're going to be able to deny that sweet tooth at the end of your workout when you finish your spinning class and you're feeling a little bit burnt out. You're going to go slam a Jamba Juice smoothie that has more calories in it than what you just burned during the class, and you're going to perpetuate sugar burning and make it very difficult to transition over into fat adaptation if you're exercising too hard too frequently. So we want to tone down our general energy expenditure during exercise and be more sensible about going at aerobic heart rates. Again, the other show will have more details. And also, when you're going into the high-intensity explosive workouts, make them short and sweet. You know, get the business done and get out of the gym before you linger too long in a high-stress workout. So that's the big one on exercise, and going hand in hand with proper training patterns is more general everyday movement, because every time you sit at your desk, you are compromising your fat burning abilities. You're becoming more insulin resistant as you sit for prolonged periods. And if you just simply get up and walk around the office courtyard for 5 minutes, you are promoting accelerated fat burning and improving your fat burning abilities by being in a movement state of living. The stand-up desk movement has got a lot of popularity, but it goes beyond that. It goes into the main goal at workplace is variation rather than just trading in your sitting position for a standing position. So we want to sit down, we want to stand up, we want to move around, we want to take phone calls on the go. We want to be sure to take 2 to 5 minute breaks every couple hours and a 20-minute break every 3 or 4 hours, and just getting out there and moving around so that you're avoiding these prolonged periods of stillness that compromise fat burning and will lead you, again, when I say insulin resistant, that means poorly processing insulin, and that will cause you to crave sugar because, again, you're locking your fat away in storage when you're not moving around. and then the final element is sleep. And oh boy, I mean, if your sleep is compromised, if your sleep habits are poor, you might as well not listen or worry about anything that's been previously discussed on this show, because that will all of a sudden launch into number one highest priority in your life. Nothing you do, all the exercise, all the hard workouts that you do, all the diligent dietary restriction of eating these foods and watching these foods and measuring your carbohydrates, none of that stuff matters if your sleep is compromised, because it has such a profound effect on your metabolic function. And if you skimp on sleep, you will be a sugar burner. Simple as that.
Totally, totally agree. Now, I have a question because it's of great interest of mine. And what are your thoughts? And maybe I don't know if it's discussed in the Keto Reset or not, on exogenous ketones, things that you can ketones that you can actually consume.
Whew, it's getting to be a really touchy subject now, and a very interesting one.
It's dicey and interesting. I know.
Yeah. So those of you totally unfamiliar, science has now afforded us the ability to consume these exact ketone bodies, the same things we're making in our liver. The beta hydroxybutyrate form is what's contained in the supplements, and you can now mix these powders in water and drink ketones. And so you immediately get into this state of ketosis where you have a high level of ketones in the bloodstream. The way to do it through diet is extreme dietary restriction for a prolonged period of time. So even, let's say for a novice, it might take you up to a week of carbohydrate restriction to finally show on a blood meter the confirmation that you're in ketosis. Or you can drink a drink, and in 15 minutes you can test your blood and you'll be at a high level of blood ketones. So it has amazing abilities and potential for those suffering from metabolic disease to battle cancer, seizures, and things like that. So the research and the breakthrough in science is amazing, because these are life-saving matters to people that are suffering from drug-resistant seizures. To be able to be in ketosis and burning ketones can protect them because it raises the oxygen threshold in the brain against seizures. So there's a lot of positive things, and it's really exciting. But again, if you think about this sort of from a philosophical point of view, to be able to shortcut the process of something that you have to work really hard for with diligent dietary adherence brings up some strange conundrums. And one of them is, could this thing be seen as a hangover cure because you just had a slice of cheesecake and now you feel guilty, so you're going to go home and you're going to drink a ketone drink and you're going to be in ketosis instead of that sugar burning mode? I'm not going to shut the door and say that's absolutely wrong, because they're doing some studies now. Dr. Dom D'Agostino, one of the leading scientific researchers, is doing this so-called cupcake study where they are showing some evidence that consuming ketones will mute the insulin response after a high carbohydrate meal. However, it's clear that the best intended use of these products are that they're used in a foundational state of keto adapted eating, or at least low carbohydrate eating, so they can be an adjunct or a little boost to what you're already doing, working so hard with your diet. And this might be especially true in the area of athletic performance, because when you consume this product at the time of, let's say, a planned high intensity workout, you are going to be delivering to your bloodstream a higher octane, cleaner burning fuel source than the usual glucose. Because when you burn glucose, you create a lot of reactive oxygen species, free radicals in the bloodstream. It's known as a dirty burning fuel because it does not require mitochondria to burn, and mitochondria helps protect against the free radical production. And so now when you're burning ketones, you might get a performance edge, and you might feel less sore the next day if you consume those around a high intensity workout. So me personally, as an athlete, I feel like these supplements have a lot of potential, but they also have a lot of potential for abuse. And then back to some of the content that we discussed earlier, just because you're in ketosis, it don't mean nothing big deal, man. You know, it's like, it's a bigger picture that we have to look at. So just drinking these powders, again, you're going to burn through them quickly no matter who you are. So they're not going to have a transformative effect on your lifestyle. just because you're having access to these at a moment's notice. So hopefully that gives you the perspective. But I definitely would say there might be another good possible use for these is when you're trying to transition over into fat and keto adaptation and you're struggling and you're sitting here in the afternoon and you feel a little bit of an energy lull, and you're tempted to reach for a bread or sugar snack. These might be something in your arsenal where you could go get a nice hot tea or a coffee and put some ketones in there and get a little bit of an energy boost and a little bit of source of clean burning fuel for your brain. And when you get that boost in your brain, you're going to have less likelihood of dipping over into sugar.
That's exactly how I use them, and I agree with everything you said. Now, I know our time is running short, so I have two quick questions. One, it's kind of a fun question. The day in the life of Brad Kearns, from waking to bedtime.
Well, I get plenty of sleep, man. That's my number one, and I just happen to be sort of I believe, genetically, and also just emphasizing it as a philosophical foundation of my life is that sleep's number one. So I'm sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night, and I feel like that's my golden zone. And if I get less than that, which is very rare, I just don't feel right. And I'm very highly attuned to my cognitive function. I want to be high productivity because I'm working, on things that matter and matter to me and require high cognitive function. So, that's the number one thing is that I try to wake up without an alarm, and I want to feel refreshed and energized naturally when I wake up. I don't want to rely on a substance like caffeine to get me going and get me into the groove. So that's my first emphasis point. And when I feel kind of lousy when I wake up, which is also rare, I will trace that back to my behavior patterns in the previous days and try to recalibrate and set aside time for perhaps a nap when I've fallen short on sleep. And I'm really big on napping too. Even if I haven't fallen short on sleep, there's a point in the afternoon I think we can all identify with where we feel a little bit of natural lull in our circadian rhythm. And this is a genetic programmed until I think it's, did they say 8 hours after waking? It's something around 8 hours after you wake up. You have a little bit of a lull, and a lot of times I'll find the time to go down for 20 minutes. And even if you're not a good sleeper and you're not used to napping and you're too restless to nap, if you can just get away from whatever you've been doing and relax and lay in the sun or lay in bed and close your eyes or tip your car seat back in your office parking lot and just chill and train your body to be able to chill at a moment's notice, you get a lot of cognitive and emotional benefits from this. So I'm very good at this now. I turn on my Ocean Sounds, my app that has it's the rain sounds, raindrop sounds, Rainmaker Pro it's called. And as soon as those raindrops start falling, my brain goes into that calm alpha state, and I'm getting a rest period that I so love so much in the afternoon. So I look forward to it. And when I wake up, a lot of times it feels like morning and I'm extremely productive, and I enhance my productivity for the rest of the workday. So sleeping and napping are a big part of my life. And this dates back, Noah, to my days as a professional triathlete when all I had to do was, train and perform. And so my entire life and my career was built around, my physical productivity. And that's not something that a lot of people can do. But I'm carrying that theme forward into my daily life for the rest of my life because it was so important to me back then. And back then, I like to say that during my 9-year career as a professional triathlete, I slept for half of that time. I was asleep for half of my career because every night I got a good 10 hours of sleep for sure. And every afternoon I went down for a 2-hour nap. And so that equals 12. Again, don't try this at home if you have a job or people that are counting on you. But when I was able to do that, it was exactly what I needed to do to get the most out of my body. And let me tell you, if I missed that 2-hour nap for some reason, I could feel it in my performance in my swim workout that evening. So, as an athlete, of course it makes sense to get all that sleep. Now I'm getting down to, 8 or 9, like I said, and a 20-minute nap. And that's plenty because I'm not training to the extreme that I was. But these principles still hold true, that rest and peak performance, and not wasting time in that zombie-like state where you're sitting at your desk and noticing that your fingers are clicking over into YouTube videos rather than finishing the proposal that you've been working on. And that's just a function of overtired, overstimulated cognitive function because you have your phone with you all day. And those are things that I try to disengage from. I try to put my phone away at distinct periods of time in the evening and stay away from technology because I've been on it for a long time during the day anyway. So I like to get out and be physical and play speed golf. So going in order again, I'm waking up with plenty of sleep, and then my fitness regimen varies and alters over time, but I do have this morning routine that I'm really big on, and you can search on YouTube for Brad Kearns morning routine, and it's kind of a custom designed brief mobility, flexibility exercise drills that I do to start my day. And so I've put that into place, and I've been going now for most of the year 2017 with an every single day commitment to this very brief morning routine, regardless of what my workout decisions are after that.
I loved every one of those answers. Thank you. Now, last thing, just how do people find out more about you, the new book, so on and so forth?
KetoReset.com is the place to go for all things about this new book that's actually coming out the day we record the show, October 3rd, 2017. It's available where all books are sold, and the website will be continued to being built up with more content. The Keto Reset podcast, I encourage you to go listen to that wherever you like to enjoy podcasts and look into this stuff, because it's a great feeling to get away from that carbohydrate dependency. And now we're looking at, these are matters of life or death when we're looking at the rates of disease increase, and even healthy people that think they're eating healthy but are in this carbohydrate dependency pattern it's now turning out to be not that good for you. And this is not a disputed statement anymore like it was 10 years ago. We got to get away from sugars and grains as our foremost takeaway and start transitioning over into a diet that emphasizes healthy sources of fat and enables you to do things like skip meals and go into these periods of brief or prolonged fast and get the assorted health benefits that are really important to longevity and also peak performance.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate your time today. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. If you'd like what you've heard today, because I know I certainly did, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.